Excuse me, sir. Can I sit with you?" The voice came out barely louder than a breath. Fragile, trembling like a spider's thread caught in winter wind, Dominic Velasco looked up from his black coffee and froze. A boy stood beside his table, 6 years old, maybe 7, his left leg dragged slightly behind him, his small body tilting to one side as if standing straight cost him something he couldn't afford to pay. Dominic's eyes moved without permission, cataloging details the way a man in his position learned to catalog everything. The jacket hung off the boy's frame like a sail without wind, 2 sizes too large, frayed at the shoulder where the stitching had given up. Hand-me-down. No, worse. Thrown away. The kind of clothes that ended up in donation bins that nobody ever checked. Cracked lips, hollow cheeks that shouldn't exist on a face so young, dark circles under eyes that had seen too many sleepless nights, and there on the small wrist poking out from the oversized sleeve bruises, faded yellow and purple, shaped like fingers. Adult fingers. The boy wasn't crying. That detail hit Dominic harder than anything else. Children cried. Children begged. Children made noise when they were scared or hungry or hurt. This one just stood there, waiting, like he'd already calculated the odds of rejection and accepted them. Dominic had seen that look before. Marco, 8 years old, lying on the kitchen floor, blood pooling beneath him like a dark halo, eyes still open, still looking at the door, still waiting for his brother to come home. The memory flashed and vanished in 2 seconds, but 2 seconds was enough. Dominic recognized something in this boy's eyes that made his chest constrict. Not hope. Hope had a brightness to it, an upward tilt. This was something else entirely. This was the look of a child who had stopped expecting adults to help. The boy wasn't here for food. The diner was full of people eating. If he wanted scraps, he could hover near the trash cans out back like the other street kids sometimes did. No. He'd walked past every other table. Past the families. Past the couples. Past the old men reading newspapers. He'd walked straight to the corner booth where Dominic Velasco sat alone. The booth that everyone else in Rosie's Corner Diner pretended didn't exist. This boy isn't asking for a meal, Dominic realized. He's asking for safety. Dominic didn't ask why. He didn't ask where the boy's parents were. He didn't glance around the diner to gauge whether helping this child would cost him something socially, strategically, or otherwise. He simply reached out with his foot and pushed the chair across from him away from the table, slowly, gently, like sliding a lifeboat across still water toward someone drowning. Sit. One word. No explanation. No conditions. The boy stared at the chair like it might disappear if he blinked. Like chairs offering safety were things that happened to other children. In other lives. In stories that never included him. Then, slowly, so slowly, it hurt to watch. He lowered himself into the seat. His whole body trembled. His hands gripped the edge of the table until his knuckles went white. But he didn't make a sound. Didn't cry. Didn't thank Dominic or ask what would happen next. He just sat and breathed. And for the first time since Dominic had started watching, the boy's shoulders dropped half an inch. Outside, Chicago's December wind howled against the diner windows. Inside, the lunch crowd chattered and clinked silverware against plates, oblivious to what had just shifted in the corner booth. But Dominic felt it. Dominic Velasco, the man whose name made police commissioners sweat and rival bosses check their rearview mirrors, felt something crack open in his chest. Something that had been sealed shut for 10 years. Something that felt terrifyingly like hope. And he had no idea what to do with it. 10 minutes earlier, Ethan stood outside Rosie's Corner Diner, his breath forming small white clouds in the December air. The cold bit through his thin jacket, but he barely noticed. He'd stopped feeling cold months ago. Or maybe he'd just stopped caring. 10 seconds. Find the safest person. Don't be wrong. The rule repeated in his head like a prayer. A survival ritual he'd perfected over 18 months of living with Uncle Ray. 10 seconds to scan a room. 10 seconds to read faces. Body language. The tiny signals that told him who might help and who would hurt. 10 seconds to decide if running was worth the pain in his leg. He'd learned the hard way that wrong choices had consequences. Bruises. Hunger. Worse. Ethan pushed open the diner door. Warm air rushed over him, carrying the smell of coffee and fried food. His stomach cramped. He hadn't eaten since yesterday morning, when Lily had slipped him half a piece of toast before Uncle Ray woke up. 10 seconds. Starting now. His eyes swept the room. Table 1. A young couple with a baby in a stroller. The mother wore a nice coat. The father had kind eyes. They looked like the families in TV commercials. Safe. Normal. Ethan limped toward them, keeping his voice soft, polite, the way Lily had taught him. "Excuse me, can I?" The mother's hand shot out, pulling the stroller closer. Her eyes dropped to Ethan's torn jacket, his dirty sneakers, the way he stood crooked because standing straight made his legs scream. Fear flickered across her face. Not fear of him, fear of what he represented. Poverty, problems, something that might stain her perfect Saturday lunch. The father shook his head before Ethan could finish. Sorry, we're in a hurry. They weren't in a hurry. Their food hadn't even arrived yet. Ethan nodded once, stepped back, didn't argue, didn't beg. Begging made things worse. Begging made people uncomfortable. And uncomfortable people got angry, and angry people called security or police. And police asked questions, and questions led back to Uncle Ray. Next, table 2. An old man reading a newspaper, alone. A cup of coffee growing cold beside him. Ethan approached slowly. Stood beside the table for 5 full seconds. The old man's eyes never left his newspaper. But Ethan saw his jaw tighten, saw his fingers grip the pages a little harder. He knows I'm here. He's choosing not to see me. Ethan understood. Invisible was sometimes safer than rejected. Next, table 3. A group of middle-aged women in church clothes. Crosses hanging from their necks. Bibles stacked on the table beside their plates. One of them spotted Ethan approaching. Her eyebrows drew together. Where are your parents, child? You shouldn't be wandering around alone like this. The question wasn't concern. It was accusation. What kind of parents probably looking to steal something? Ethan's hand curled into a fist inside his pocket. His fingernails dug into his palm. Don't react. Don't cry. Don't give them a reason to remember you. He walked away without answering. 3 tables. 3 rejections. 3 versions of the same message. You are not our problem. Ethan stopped in the middle of the diner. His leg throbbed. His chest ached. His eyes stung with tears he refused to let fall. One more. Just try one more. He scanned the room again, and this time, he saw the corner booth. A man sat alone. Black suit, white shirt, no tie. A scar cutting through his left eyebrow like a permanent reminder of violence. Everyone in the diner was avoiding that corner, giving it space. The waitress had taken his order from 3 feet away instead of standing beside the table like she did with other customers. They're scared of him. Ethan studied the man's face. Hard jaw, cold eyes, hands that looked like they knew how to hurt people. People are scared of Uncle Ray, too. When he's sober. When there are witnesses. But Uncle Ray smiled at the neighbors, shook hands at church, told everyone what a burden his poor orphaned niece and nephew were, and how hard he was trying to help them. Then he went home and used his belt. This man in the corner booth wasn't smiling, wasn't pretending, wasn't performing kindness for an audience. He just was. Dangerous people don't pretend to be nice, Ethan thought. Nice people who are secretly dangerous, those are the ones you have to watch. His leg screamed as he walked toward the corner booth. Each step sent fire up his hip, through his spine. The break had never healed right. Uncle Ray said doctors cost money they didn't have. But Ethan didn't stop, because he'd learned something in 18 months of survival that most adults never figured out. Real danger was honest. Real danger didn't smile at you before it struck. It was the fake kindness you had to fear. The warm words that turned to fists behind closed doors. The helping hands that became hitting hands when no one was watching. The man in the corner booth might hurt him, but at least Ethan would see it coming. Dominic raised 2 fingers without looking away from the boy. The waitress appeared within seconds. She'd been avoiding his table all morning, refilling his coffee from arm's length, taking his order with her eyes fixed somewhere over his shoulder. But when Dominic Velasco gestured, people came. That was simply how the world worked. Burger, fries, chocolate milkshake. His voice was flat, brooking no discussion. Fast. The waitress glanced at Ethan at his torn jacket, his hollow cheeks, the way he sat rigid in the booth like a rabbit frozen before a wolf, and something flickered across her face. Pity, maybe, or discomfort. She hurried away without writing anything down. Ethan's hands twisted together under the table. His eyes darted to Dominic, then away, then back again. When he spoke, his voice cracked on the first word. I don't have money. Dominic didn't look at him. He gazed out the window instead, watching the gray December street, the people hurrying past with their shopping bags and their warm coats and their lives that had never included a child like this one. I didn't ask if you had money. Silence stretched between them. Ethan seemed to shrink into himself, unsure what to do with a response that wasn't a rejection. The food arrived faster than any order Dominic had ever placed at Rosie's. The waitress set the plate down gently in front of Ethan, along with a tall glass of chocolate milkshake topped with whipped cream. Then she retreated, practically fleeing back to the safety of the counter. Ethan stared at the burger like it might bite him first. His hands reached out, then stopped, hovered over the plate, trembling, not from cold, not from weakness, from disbelief. Slowly, carefully, he picked up the burger with both hands, took a small bite, chewed fast, swallowed faster. No sound, no mess. His elbows tucked tight against his body, making himself as small as possible. His eyes kept flicking toward the door every few seconds, tracking everyone who entered or exited. Dominic watched without appearing to watch. He'd seen this before, the silent eating, the hunched posture, the constant vigilance. He'd seen it in the street kids who lived under the overpass near his first warehouse, back when he was still climbing his way up. He'd seen it in men fresh out of prison, eating their first meal in freedom like someone might snatch it away at any moment. He'd seen it in Marco, the year their father drank away the grocery money and dinner became a competition for scraps, eating like someone will take it if you're not fast enough. "What's your name?" Ethan stopped mid-chew, swallowed hard, almost choking. His eyes went wide for a split second before he controlled his expression. "Ethan." A pause. "Ethan Cole, sir." "Sir." The word came out automatic, practiced. The politeness of a child who had learned that manners sometimes prevented beatings. Dominic filed the name away. Cole. He'd have Marcus run it later. "Who did that to your leg?" Ethan's whole body went rigid. His fingers tightened around the burger until the bun compressed. His eyes dropped to the plate, fixed on a spot of ketchup like it contained the secrets of the universe. 5 seconds of silence. 10. Dominic could see the war playing out behind the boy's eyes. The desperate need to tell someone battling against the terror of what might happen if he did. He didn't push. Pushing broke things. Pushing made people shut down, retreat into themselves, build walls that took years to crack. "Eat," Dominic said instead. "No one's taking it from you." Ethan's shoulders dropped half an inch. He raised the burger again, took another bite. Still fast, but not quite as frantic. Dominic's phone buzzed against his thigh. He pulled it out, glanced at the screen. "Marcus, excuse me." He stood and walked toward the door, stepping outside into the bitter wind. But he positioned himself where he could see through the window, where the boy remained in his line of sight. "Boss." Marcus's voice was clipped, efficient. "The meeting with Kozlov. His people confirmed 3 o'clock at the warehouse. Security's already postponed it." Silence on the other end. In 2 years working as Dominic's right hand, Marcus had never heard him postpone anything related to Viktor Kozlov. The Russian was a threat that demanded constant attention, a snake that would strike the moment you looked away. "Boss?" Marcus's confusion bled through his professional tone. "Is everything all right?" Dominic watched through the glass as Ethan glanced around the diner, then quickly guiltily tore the remaining half of his burger in two. One piece went into his mouth, the other disappeared into his jacket pocket, saving it for someone else. "Maybe," Dominic said. "I'll call you back." He ended the call without waiting for a response. When he returned to the booth, sliding back into his seat, something had changed. Ethan sat straighter. His hands rested on the table instead of hiding beneath it. He was still eating the fries one by one, still watching the door, still coiled tight with the readiness to run, but he was chewing slower now. For the first time in 18 months, Ethan Cole was eating like the food might actually still be there when he reached for the next bite. Dominic settled back into the booth, his eyes landing on the bulge in Ethan's jacket pocket, the hidden half of the burger, the secret the boy thought he'd concealed. "Who are you saving it for?" Ethan's hand flew to his pocket instinctively, pressing against the fabric like he could make the evidence disappear. His mouth opened, a lie forming on his lips, the automatic response of a child who had learned that truth was dangerous. But something in Dominic's gaze stopped him. Not kindness, not pity, something harder, something that said, "I've seen worse than whatever you're hiding, and I'm still here. My sister." The words came out barely above a whisper. "Lily. She hasn't eaten since yesterday. She gives everything to me." Dominic's jaw tightened. A small movement, barely visible, but there. "Tell me about Lily." He paused. "And tell me about the person who made you limp." Ethan's fingers found a cold fry on the plate. He turned it over and over, not eating it, just needing something to hold. Then he started talking. The words came out in fragments, broken pieces of a broken life, tumbling out like shattered glass. "Mom and Dad died 18 months ago. Car accident on the highway." He remembered the sirens, the flashing lights turning the night red and blue, the hospital smell antiseptic and plastic, and something underneath that he later learned was death. He remembered Lily holding him in the waiting room, her body shaking, her tears falling into his hair. She was 25 and suddenly responsible for a 5-year-old. No job, no money, no one else. "We went to live with Uncle Ray. Mom's brother. He was the only family left. Ethan's voice flattened. He was nice at first, for a few days. Then came the first bottle of whiskey, then the second, then hundreds more, until the bottles became the furniture, and Ray became something else entirely. He says I'm a burden, says I look like my dad. Ethan's hand squeezed the fry until it crumbled. He hated my dad. Hated that Mom married him instead of, I don't know, someone else. Lily owed Ray money, $15,000 for the funeral, for the first month's rent, for all the things orphans needed that no one told you about until the bills arrived. She can't leave. He won't let her. He says if she tries, he'll tell the police she's unfit. He'll take me away from her. Dominic listened without interrupting. His face revealed nothing, but his eyes were cataloging every word, filing them away in whatever mental cabinet held the names of people who needed to answer for their sins. Last week, Ethan continued, his voice shrinking, I spilled a glass of water. It was an accident, but Uncle Ray was drunk, and the boy's hand moved unconsciously to his left leg. He pushed me down the stairs. I heard something crack. It hurt so bad I couldn't breathe. He remembered lying at the bottom of the steps, the world spinning, his leg twisted at an angle that made his stomach lurch. I asked to go to the doctor. He said doctors cost money. He said I was faking it. Ethan's lip trembled once before he controlled it. I wasn't faking. Silence settled over the booth. Dominic waited, because he knew there was more. He could see it in the way Ethan's shoulders hunched, the way his eyes dropped to the table, the way his whole body braced itself for something worse. Last night, Ethan whispered, Uncle Ray got really drunk, worse than usual. The boy looked up then, looked directly into Dominic's eyes, and Dominic saw something that made his blood turn to ice. Not fear, not sadness. Acceptance, the quiet resignation of a child who had heard his own death sentence and believed it. He said if I disappeared, everything would be easier. Lily would behave better. The money would stretch further. Ethan swallowed hard. He said it like he was making a plan. The air in the diner seemed to thicken. Sounds faded, the clinking silverware, the murmured conversations, the hiss of the coffee machine. Everything narrowed to this booth, this moment, this boy. Dominic didn't speak for 10 seconds. His eyes had changed. Darker now. Colder. The eyes of a man who had built an empire on knowing exactly how to handle people who hurt the innocent. Without a word, he pulled out his phone and dialed. Marcus answered on the first ring. I need an address. Dominic's voice was ice. Ray Mitchell, Chicago area. Now. Boss. What? Now. Marcus. He ended the call. Ethan stared at the stranger who had just issued a command like a king dispatching soldiers. A stranger who had listened to his broken story without flinching, without dismissing, without telling him he was exaggerating or lying or seeking attention. For the first time in 18 months, someone had heard him, really heard him, and that someone looked like he intended to do something about it. The diner door burst open. Cold wind rushed in, carrying with it a young woman who moved like someone fleeing a fire. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, strands escaping around her face. A wrinkled bakery uniform hung off her thin frame, the pale pink fabric stained with flour, and what might have been tears. Ethan! She spotted him immediately. Her eyes locked onto her brother like he was the only thing in the room that mattered, and she ran, past the young couple with the stroller, past the old man with his newspaper, past the church women who turned to stare at this new disruption to their Saturday lunch. Lily Cole dropped to her knees beside the booth and pulled Ethan into her arms so tightly that the boy let out a small gasp. Where did you go? I've been looking everywhere. Her voice cracked, hovering between relief and terror. Uncle Ray woke up and you weren't there. And I thought she couldn't finish the sentence. Ethan's small hands gripped the back of her uniform, holding on like she might disappear if he let go. I'm sorry, Lily. I'm sorry. Shh. It's okay. You're okay. She pulled back, her hands framing his face, checking him for new injuries. We need to go. Uncle Ray is... She stopped mid-sentence. Her fingers had brushed her own cheek, and in the bright lights of the diner, she suddenly became aware of what everyone else could see. The fresh bruise blooming purple across her cheekbone, the swelling near her eye that she'd tried to hide with her hair, the split in her lower lip that she'd been biting to keep from crying. And then she looked up. Dominic Velasco sat across the booth, watching her with eyes that gave nothing away. Gray eyes, cold eyes, the eyes of a man who had seen every kind of violence the world had to offer and had decided to become fluent in it himself. Lily's assessment took 3 seconds. Expensive suit, the kind that cost more than 6 months of her bakery wages. A scar cutting through his left eyebrow, old and faded but impossible to miss. A heavy ring on his right hand. Some kind of family crest etched into the gold. Everything about him screamed danger. "Who are you?" Lily pulled Ethan closer, positioning her body between her brother and this stranger. "Why is my brother sitting with you?" Dominic didn't stand, didn't smile, didn't offer any of the social niceties that usually smoothed over awkward situations. He asked if he could sit with me. A pause. I said yes. The simplicity of the answer threw Lily off balance. She'd expected something else, an explanation, an excuse, a lie. "Thank you." She gripped Ethan's shoulders. "But we need to leave now." "No." The word was small but fierce. Ethan grabbed the edge of the table, his knuckles going white. He planted himself in the booth like a tree, refusing to be uprooted. "Ethan, please." Lily's voice dropped to a whisper. "We have to go home. Uncle Ray will. He'll hit you." Ethan's voice rose, loud enough that nearby tables went quiet. "Then he'll hit me, like always." The words hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. A woman at the next booth turned to look. A man near the counter stopped chewing. The waitress froze with a coffee pot suspended over someone's cup. Lily's face flushed crimson. Shame and pain and helplessness warred across her features, each emotion fighting for dominance. "Ethan, don't." "It's true." The boy's chin lifted. Defiant, desperate. "You know it's true." Dominic stood. The movement was slow, deliberate, controlled, but Lily still stepped back half a pace on instinct. Because men who moved like that, who commanded space like that, were men you gave room to. "You can take him back." Dominic's voice was flat, carrying no judgment but no warmth either. "Back to the man who broke his leg and put that bruise on your face." Lily flinched. "Or you can sit down." He gestured to the empty space in the booth. "And tell me why you haven't left." Lily stood frozen, her breath coming in short, shallow gasps. Her eyes darted between Dominic and Ethan, between the door and the booth, between escape and something she couldn't name. Ethan reached up and touched her hand. "Please, Lily." His voice was barely a whisper now. "I'm tired of being scared." Something crumbled behind Lily's eyes. All the walls she'd built, all the lies she'd told herself about surviving, about waiting for the right moment, about things getting better if she just held on a little longer. She looked at her brother, 6 years old, leg damaged, eyes too old for his face, and she saw 18 months of failure reflected back at her. 18 months of not protecting him. 18 months of telling herself that enduring was the same as surviving. Lily Cole, who had been mother and father and shield to this child since the day their parents died, slowly lowered herself into the booth beside her brother. She didn't know if this was the right choice. She didn't know if this stranger was salvation or just a different kind of danger. But for the first time in 18 months, she was too tired to run. Dominic raised his hand toward the waitress again. "Another plate." "Same order." Lily shook her head quickly. "I'm not hungry. You haven't eaten since yesterday." It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact, delivered in the same flat tone he might use to note that the sky was gray or the coffee was black. Lily's eyes snapped to Ethan. The boy shrank under her gaze, his shoulders hunching with guilt. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I didn't mean to tell. It's okay." Lily's voice softened despite herself. She couldn't stay angry at him. She'd never been able to stay angry at him. "It's okay." The waitress appeared with another burger, another pile of fries, another milkshake. She set them in front of Lily with the nervous efficiency of someone who wanted to be anywhere else. Lily stared at the food, her stomach cramped with hunger, but her hands stayed in her lap. Then, without touching the plate, she started talking. "My parents died 18 months ago." The words came out hollow, rehearsed, like she'd said them so many times they'd lost their sharp edges. "Car accident on I-90. A truck driver fell asleep at the wheel." She looked down at her hands, the calluses from kneading dough, the small burns from hot ovens, the cracked skin that no amount of lotion could fix. "I was 25, just graduated college, no stable job, no savings, no idea how to raise a 6-year-old. Ethan reached over and touched her arm. She covered his small hand with hers. "Ray is my mother's brother, the only family we had left." Her jaw tightened. "He said he would help." The word help came out like poison. "He paid for the funeral, put down the deposit on an apartment, $15,000. Lily laughed a bitter, broken sound. "I thought that's what family did. I thought he was being kind." Dominic listened without moving. His coffee sat untouched before him, growing cold. "Then what?" he asked. "Then he wanted interest. Then he said I had to live with him until I paid it back. Then he started drinking." Lily's hand rose to her cheek, fingers brushing the bruise without seeming to realize it. "Then he started hitting." Silence. Ethan pressed closer to his sister, his small body trying to offer comfort he was too young to give. My parents had life insurance, Lily continued. $200,000. But it's in a trust fund. For Ethan. She swallowed hard. Ray is the trustee. He controls the money until Ethan turns 18. Understanding flickered in Dominic's eyes. So he doesn't want you to leave, and he doesn't want to lose control of the boy. Lily nodded, her eyes reddening. Every time I talk about moving out, he threatens to call the police. Says I'm neglecting Ethan. Says he has money for lawyers and I'm just a bakery girl who can barely pay rent. She wrapped her arms around herself, hugging her own body as if trying to hold the pieces together. The cops came once, 6 months ago. A neighbor heard screaming and called it in. Lily's voice dropped. Ray answered the door in a clean shirt, smiled at them, showed them Ethan's room he'd cleaned it that morning, told them I was having a hard time adjusting to adult responsibilities. She looked up at Dominic. They believed him. They looked at me like I was the problem. The diner noise continued around them, forks scraping plates, conversations humming, the bell above the door chiming, but their booth existed in a separate space. A pocket of heavy silence. Dominic studied her. Not with pity. Pity was useless. Pity was what the church women offered, what the social workers mumbled before closing their case files, what strangers gave her when they noticed the bruises. His gaze was something else. Assessment, calculation, the look of a man measuring a situation and deciding what to do about it. What do you want? The question caught Lily off guard. She blinked at him, momentarily speechless. In 18 months, no one had asked her that. Not the social workers, not the police, not the sympathetic neighbors who clucked their tongues and did nothing. Everyone asked what she should do, what she needed to do, what a responsible guardian must do. No one asked what she wanted. I want my brother to be safe. The words cracked as they left her mouth. I want him to sleep without nightmares. I want him to grow up without flinching every time a door slams. Her eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. But I don't know how. Dominic stood. He reached into his jacket and withdrew a small white card, placed it on the table in front of her. No name, no company, no title, just a phone number, printed in simple black ink. Now you know. Lily picked up the card. Her fingers trembled slightly. The paper felt heavy in her hand, weighted with something she couldn't name. She didn't know who this man was, didn't know what world he came from or what the card represented or what she was agreeing to by taking it. But for the first time in 18 months, the iron band around her chest loosened just enough for her to breathe. The growl of an engine cut through the diner's ambient noise. Through the window, Lily saw a rusted pickup truck, paint peeling from its doors, pulling into the parking lot with the aggressive speed of someone who had been looking for something and finally found it. Ethan froze mid-bite. His face went pale. His whole body went rigid. He didn't need to look outside to know who had arrived. Uncle Ray. 2 words, whispered like a curse. Lily shot to her feet, her face draining of color. Her hands found Ethan's shoulders, gripping hard, as if she could somehow make him invisible if she just held on tight enough. Oh God, he found us. The diner door swung open. Ray Mitchell stepped inside, bringing the smell of stale alcohol and cigarette smoke with him. 45 years old, but the booze had added another decade to his face. Bloodshot eyes, clothes that looked slept in, a 3-day stubble that couldn't hide the broken capillaries mapping his cheeks. But he was smiling. That smile, the one Lily knew too well. The performance smile. The we're in public so I have to pretend smile. Lily. Ethan. His voice boomed through the diner, loud enough for everyone to hear. The concerned uncle. The worried guardian. I've been looking everywhere for you two. He spread his arms wide as he approached. The picture of relief and affection. Several customers glanced up with sympathetic smiles. Oh, how sweet. A family reunion. They didn't see what Lily saw. The twitch at the corner of Ray's eye. The tension in his shoulders. The way his hands flexed and curled, like they were already imagining what they would do later. In private, when there were no witnesses. Ray reached the booth. Come on, buddy. He bent toward Ethan, voice dripping with false warmth. Let's go home. I've got that candy you like. The chocolate ones. Ethan shrank back. Not toward his sister. Toward Dominic. His small hand reached out and grabbed the edge of Dominic's seat, fingers curling into the leather like it was a lifeline. The movement was unconscious, instinctive, the reflex of a child seeking protection from the nearest source of safety. Ray noticed. His smile flickered. Just for a second. A crack in the mask. Ethan. The sweetness in his voice thinned. Come here. Now. I don't want to go back. Ethan's voice was small but clear. It didn't waver, didn't crack. 18 months of fear condensed into 5 words of defiance. Ray's eyes hardened, but the smile stayed fixed on his face. You're being difficult again. He straightened up, looking at Lily instead. Get him. We're leaving. Lily's mouth opened. Her hands trembled on Ethan's shoulders. Uncle Ray, we were just home. Ray's voice dropped the pretense of sweetness. Steel crept into the edges. Now, 3 words, sharp as broken glass. The customers who had been watching with idle curiosity looked away. Something in Ray's tone told them this wasn't a sweet family moment. This was something else. Something they didn't want to be part of. And then Dominic stood. The movement was slow, controlled. The unhurried rise of a man who didn't need to rush because he knew the world would wait for him. He stepped out of the booth and positioned himself between Ray and the 2 siblings. He didn't speak, didn't threaten, didn't raise his voice. He just stood there, 6 feet 2 inches of cold, quiet menace. Shoulders that blocked Ray's path like a wall of stone. Eyes that held no anger, no emotion at all, just the flat assessment of a predator deciding whether the thing in front of him was worth the effort of killing. Ray looked up. For the first time, he really looked at the man standing before him, the black suit that cost more than Ray's truck, the scar through the eyebrow, the heavy gold ring on his finger, the posture of someone who had never been told no in his entire adult life. Who the hell are you? Ray's voice wavered slightly. Someone you don't want to bother. 7 words, spoken softly, almost gently. But something in them made Ray take half a step backward. Instinct. The survival reflex of a bully who had spent his whole life identifying people weaker than himself and had just encountered someone who wasn't. But Ray couldn't back down. Not in front of all these people. Not in front of Lily, who might start thinking she could stand up to him. Lily. He forced his voice harder. Ethan. Home. Now. Dominic didn't move. They're not going anywhere. The words fell like stones into still water. Ray's face reddened. His fists clenched at his sides. For a moment, it looked like he might do something stupid, swing at Dominic, grab Lily's arm, make a scene. But then his eyes met Dominic's, and whatever Ray saw there made him reconsider. Fine. Ray stepped back, hands raised in mock surrender. Fine. Have it your way. He turned toward the door, but paused at the last moment, looked back over his shoulder at Lily. You know what happens next. The words were quiet, meant only for her. Then he was gone, the door swinging shut behind him, the rusted truck roaring to life and peeling out of the parking lot with a screech of tires. Lily stood frozen, her face white, her hands shaking. Ethan's fingers were still wrapped around Dominic's seat. Neither of them had ever seen anyone make Ray Mitchell back down before. The sound of Ray's truck faded into the distance, swallowed by the Chicago traffic. Lily's hands were still shaking. She grabbed her purse from the booth, movements jerky with panic. I have to go. If I'm not home tonight, he'll what? Dominic's voice cut through her panic like a blade through paper. Flat, calm, utterly devoid of the fear that was clawing at her chest. Beat you? Beat the boy? Or something worse? Bailey froze. Her hand clutched the strap of her purse so tightly her knuckles went white. Dominic didn't look away. You go back tonight. Tomorrow the boy has new bruises. Next week, maybe another broken bone. His voice remained level, almost clinical. Next month, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The silence said everything. Lily's eyes burned. Her throat tightened. She wanted to scream that he didn't understand, that it wasn't that simple, that leaving wasn't an option she had. You don't understand. The words came out ragged, desperate. He has legal custody. The police came once they believed him. Not me. She laughed bitterly, the sound hollow and broken. He has money. He has connections. He knows how to smile at the right people, say the right things. Her voice cracked. And I'm just his niece who owes him money. A girl who works day shifts at a bakery for minimum wage. Dominic said nothing, just watched her with those gray eyes that seemed to see everything. The system doesn't help people like me. Lily's shoulders sagged. It helps people like him. Dominic slid back into the booth. When he spoke again, his voice was lower, quieter, meant only for her ears. I have a house. Safe. Guarded. He paused. You and the boy can stay there while I handle the Ray Mitchell situation. Lily stared at him. What do you want? The question came out sharper than she intended. Suspicious. Because nothing in her life came without a price. Every kindness had strings. Every helping hand eventually became a fist. Dominic turned his gaze toward the window. Outside, the afternoon shadows were lengthening, the winter sun already beginning its early descent. 10 years ago, My brother was the same age as Ethan. His voice didn't waver, but something underneath it shifted, cracked. He was hurt too, scared too, needed someone to step in. The words hung in the air like smoke. No one did. Dominic's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I got there 5 minutes too late, and I've spent the last 10 years living with those 5 minutes. He turned back to look at Lily. His eyes were the same cold gray, but now she could see something behind them. A wound that had never healed. A guilt that had calcified into something permanent. I won't make that mistake again. Lily didn't know what to say. This man, this stranger in an expensive suit with a scar on his face and a ring that looked like it belonged to royalty, had just shown her the deepest part of himself. The part that people like him usually kept locked away. A small hand tugged at her sleeve. Lily. Ethan's voice was barely a whisper. His eyes were wet, wide, pleading. Please. I don't want to go back to Uncle Ray's house. His lower lip trembled. I'm scared. I'm so scared. The last word cracked in half. Lily looked at her brother. 6 years old, broken leg that never healed right, eyes that had seen too much. A child who should be thinking about cartoons and toys and what to name his imaginary friend, not calculating which rooms in the house were safest to hide in when the drinking started. Then she looked at Dominic, a stranger. A man whose name she didn't even know, whose world she couldn't begin to understand. But he had shown her his wound, and in return, she had shown him hers. That was more than anyone else had ever done. Lily took a deep breath. One night. The words came out steady, though her heart was racing. Just one night. Dominic nodded once. A single dip of his chin that made no promises, offered no reassurances. He stood, dropped several bills on the table without counting them, and walked toward the door. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. Lily took Ethan's hand, pulled him gently from the booth, and followed the stranger in the black suit into the cold Chicago afternoon. Behind them, the waitress finally exhaled. The black Mercedes glided through Chicago's north side, leaving behind the cramped streets and faded storefronts for wider roads lined with old oak trees. Lily watched the neighborhoods change through the tinted windows. The buildings grew larger. The lawns grew greener. The cars parked in driveways grew more expensive. When they turned onto a private road marked only by a small brass number, her stomach tightened. The iron gates rose before them, 12 feet tall, topped with ornate spikes, flanked by stone pillars that looked older than the country itself. Lily's hand found Ethan's and squeezed. The gates swung open silently, revealing a cobblestone drive that curved through manicured gardens toward a house that wasn't a house at all. It was a mansion, 3 stories of gray stone and dark windows, ivy climbing the eastern wall, a fountain in the circular drive, dormant for winter, the kind of home that appeared in movies about old money and dangerous men. What? Lily's voice came out smaller than she intended. What do you do for a living? Dominic's eyes met hers in the rearview mirror. Business. One word, no explanation, no elaboration. Lily wanted to press further, wanted to demand answers, but something in his tone told her this wasn't the time, and perhaps there would never be a right time for that particular question. The car stopped before the main entrance. Before Dominic could open his door, the front doors of the mansion swung wide, and a woman appeared on the threshold. She was perhaps 55, with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. A white apron covered her dark dress. Her face was lined with age but softened by something warm, something that reminded Lily of photographs of her grandmother. The woman's eyes found Ethan, and her whole expression transformed. Oh, look at you! She descended the steps quickly, moving with surprising grace for her age, and dropped to her knees in front of the boy. What a precious thing you are. Her voice was rich, accented with something Mediterranean. I'm Elena, and you must be starving, I can always tell. I have chicken soup on the stove. Made it fresh this morning. Ethan stood frozen. His body had gone rigid the way it always did when adults approached too quickly, when voices got too loud, when attention turned his way. But Elena didn't grab him, didn't pull him into a hug. She simply opened her arms and waited. Slowly, so slowly, Ethan leaned forward. And then he was in her embrace, his small face pressed against her apron, his shoulders shaking with something that might have been relief. There we go, Elena murmured, stroking his hair. There we go. You're safe now. Lily watched with tears burning her eyes. She couldn't remember the last time Ethan had let someone touch him willingly. The last time he hadn't flinched away from open arms. Elena led them inside, through a foyer that echoed with their footsteps, up a sweeping staircase, down a hallway lined with doors that all looked the same. She stopped before one and pushed it open. This will be your room. Lily stepped inside and stopped breathing. The room was large, larger than the entire apartment they shared at Ray's house. A queen bed with soft gray linens, thick carpet that cushioned every step, windows that looked out over the gardens, and in the corner, arranged with careful precision, a collection of toys. Model cars lined up on a shelf, a plastic robot with movable arms, a half-built Lego castle, pieces still scattered across a small table as if someone had just stepped away. The toys weren't dusty. Someone cleaned this room regularly. Someone maintained these toys like a shrine. Lily, look! Ethan had crossed the room before she could stop him. His hands reached for a blue model car, lifting it with the reverent wonder of a child who had forgotten that toys existed. Can I play with it? Can I? Lily opened her mouth to tell him no, to remind him this wasn't their home, these weren't their things. But then she saw Dominic. He stood in the doorway, his tall frame filling the space, his eyes fixed on the car in Ethan's hands. And for just a moment, just a heartbeat, the mask cracked. Pain flickered across his features, raw and real and devastating. The pain of a man looking at something precious that he would never hold again. Elena appeared beside him, her voice soft. First time this room has heard laughter in a very long time. Dominic didn't respond. His jaw tightened, his hands curled into fists at his sides. For a moment, Lily thought he might say something, might explain the toys, the room, the grief that hung in the air like dust motes. But he only turned away, and for the first time since they'd arrived, he didn't close the door behind him. Lily watched his broad back disappear down the hallway, questions multiplying in her mind. Whose room was this? Whose toys still waited for hands that would never return? And what had happened 10 years ago that had left this man with such a wound? 3 days passed, and one night quietly became something else entirely. Day 1. The doctor arrived at 9 in the morning. He was a middle-aged man with gray temples and steady hands, carrying a black medical bag and a portable X-ray machine that probably cost more than Lily's annual salary. He didn't introduce himself beyond Dr. Warren. He didn't ask unnecessary questions. He simply knelt beside Ethan on the living room sofa and began his examination with quiet professionalism. Lily stood in the doorway, arms wrapped around herself, watching as the doctor manipulated her brother's leg with careful precision. Ethan winced but didn't cry out. He had learned long ago that crying made things worse. The X-ray took less than a minute. Dr. Warren studied the images on his tablet, his expression neutral, revealing nothing. Then he stood and addressed Dominic, who had been watching from across the room. Fibula fracture. Improperly set, or more likely, never set at all. His voice carried clearly through the space. The bone is healing crooked. He'll need minor surgery to correct it, or he'll walk with that limp for the rest of his life. Lily's heart dropped. I don't have money I didn't ask if you had money. Dominic's voice cut through her protest without even looking at her. His eyes remained fixed on the doctor. Schedule the surgery. Best surgeon available. Of course. Lily wanted to argue, wanted to refuse charity she couldn't repay, wanted to maintain some shred of independence, of pride, of the fiction that she had any control over her life. But then she looked at Ethan. He was staring up at her with eyes that held something she hadn't seen in 18 months. Hope. Real hope. The kind that believes tomorrow might actually be better than today. She couldn't say no to that. Day 2. Ethan started calling him Uncle Dom. It happened at breakfast. Elena had made pancakes, real pancakes, fluffy and golden. Not the thin gray things Lily managed with discount mix and water. Ethan was drenched in maple syrup, giggling at something Elena had said about a squirrel in the garden. Dominic passed through the kitchen, heading toward his study. Uncle Dom, Ethan called out, mouth still full. Elena says the squirrel steals from the bird feeder. Can we watch? Dominic stopped mid-stride. His whole body went rigid. His hand, reaching for his coffee cup, froze in the air. For 3 heartbeats, he didn't move. Then, slowly, he turned, looked at the boy with syrup on his chin and joy in his eyes. After breakfast, he said. Just 2 words. Quiet. Controlled. He didn't correct the name, didn't encourage it either. Just nodded once and continued toward his study. But Elena saw. Her eyes met Lily's across the kitchen, and she smiled, a sad, knowing smile that spoke of memories and loss and the strange gift of second chances. Day 3. Night fell heavy and cold. Lily couldn't sleep. She found herself on the second-floor balcony, wrapped in a blanket she'd taken from the bed, staring out at the dark garden below. The fountain was dry for winter. The hedges were silver with frost. Everything was still and silent. She didn't hear Dominic approach. He simply appeared beside her, leaning against the railing, close enough to talk but far enough to give her space. Can't sleep? Every time I close my eyes, I see his face. Lily pulled the blanket tighter. Ray's face. He won't let this go. He never lets anything go. Silence stretched between them, filled only by the distant sounds of the city. Then Lily asked the question that had been building for 3 days. What do you really do? She turned to look at him. And don't say business. Dominic didn't answer derisively. Instead, he asked his own question. What did you want to do? Before your parents died? The question caught her off guard. She hesitated. I wanted to open a bakery. My mother taught me to bake. She had this secret chocolate cake recipe been in our family for 3 generations. The memory surfaced unbidden. Her mother's hands covered in flour. The warm kitchen, the smell of chocolate and vanilla. A life that felt like it belonged to someone else now. I was going to call it Cole's Corner. Lily laughed softly, surprised by the sound. Silly, right? No. The word was simple, final, like a door closing on an argument. Dominic looked out at the darkness. I wanted something different too. Before Marco died, he didn't elaborate. Didn't need to. They stood there in silence. 2 people who had lost the futures they'd planned, who carried guilt like stones in their pockets, who were both trying in their own broken ways to make up for things that could never be made up for. And somehow, in that silence, they understood each other. The next morning, Lily stood at the window and watched Dominic teach Ethan to play chess in the garden. The boys' laughter drifted up through the glass. Dominic's voice, patient and low, explained how the night moved. Lily pressed her palm against the cold window, and for the first time since her parents died, she didn't want to leave. Day 5, Lily woke before dawn, her body still running on the survival schedule she'd developed at Ray's house up before anyone else. Move quietly, don't attract attention. Old habits died hard. The mansion was silent as she made her way down the stairs, intending to help Elena with breakfast. It was the least she could do. She couldn't accept all this kindness without offering something in return. The first-floor hallway stretched before her, lined with doors she'd never opened, leading to rooms she'd never entered. Dominic's world was vast and compartmentalized, and she'd only been shown the parts meant for guests. Then she heard voices, low, urgent, coming from behind the heavy oak door of Dominic's study. The Southside territory can't be surrendered. Kozlov is testing us. That was Marcus. She recognized his clipped, efficient tone. If we don't respond, he'll see it as weakness. A pause. The Bratva has been pushing for months. This is their move. Then Dominic's voice. Cold, commanding. Then we show him we're not weak. But no witnesses, no traces, clean. Lily's blood turned to ice. She stood frozen in the hallway, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Territory, Kozlov, Bratva, no witnesses. The words assembled themselves in her mind like puzzle pieces she'd been refusing to see. The mansion, the guards at the gate, the way people looked at Dominic with fear, the expensive suits, the heavy ring, the scars, Mafia. She stumbled backward. Her foot caught something, a decorative vase on a hallway table she hadn't noticed. Crash. Porcelain shattered across the marble floor. The study door flew open. Dominic stood in the doorway, his eyes sharp, dangerous, the eyes of a man who had survived by never being caught off guard. Behind him, Marcus reached for something at his waist. Then Dominic saw who it was. His expression shifted. The predator retreated, but not entirely. Lily. She was already running, up the stairs, down the hallway, into the bedroom where Ethan still slept, peaceful and unaware, clutching the model car he'd refused to let go of for 5 days. Lily's hands shook as she gathered him into her arms. Think clearly. Dominic had saved them, fed them, given them shelter. He was paying for Ethan's surgery, a surgery that would let her brother walk properly for the rest of his life. But he was also a criminal, a man who spoke casually about eliminating witnesses, about territory wars, about things that belonged in movies, about gangsters and violence. Is this safe for Ethan? She thought about Ray. Ray, who was legal. Ray, who had custody papers and a respectable address and a face that smiled at police officers. Ray, who had broken Ethan's leg and refused him medical care. Ray, who beat them both and called it discipline. The system protected Ray. The system would condemn Dominic, but who had actually hurt her brother? And who had helped him? The legal abuser or the illegal protector? The question had no good answer. Lily laid Ethan gently back on the bed and began packing. There wasn't much. The clothes they'd arrived in, now washed and folded. A small stuffed rabbit Elena had given Ethan, the half-eaten sandwich he'd hidden in his pocket that first day. Still there because old survival instincts didn't disappear just because the danger did. We have to leave. Tonight. before Ethan gets pulled deeper into this world. She had just finished folding Ethan's jacket when the door opened. Dominic stood in the threshold. He didn't enter, didn't approach, just watched her with those gray eyes that seemed to see everything. There was no anger in his expression, no threat, only exhaustion, and something that looked almost like resignation. "What did you hear?" His voice was quiet, not defensive, just asking. Lily straightened. She held Ethan's jacket against her chest like armor, like proof of what mattered most. "Enough." Her voice didn't waver. "Enough to know who you really are." Dominic didn't enter the room. He remained in the doorway, his broad shoulders filling the frame, but his feet planted firmly on the hallway side of the threshold, giving her space, giving her the choice to run if she wanted to. "So now you know." Not a question, not a denial, not an excuse, just a statement of fact, delivered in that flat voice she'd grown accustomed to. Lily's grip tightened on Ethan's jacket. "You're Mafia." The word came out like an accusation, a criminal, a killer. Her voice shook not from fear, she realized, from disappointment, from the crushing weight of having allowed herself to hope, to trust, to believe that maybe this time someone was actually good. Dominic nodded once. "I am who you think I am." No defense, no justification, no attempt to soften the truth. Then he took one step forward, just one, "And I'm also the man who let the boy sit down when no one else would." The words hit Lily like a physical blow. She thought of the diner, the young couple who'd pulled their stroller away, the old man who'd pretended not to see, the church women with their crosses and their whispers, all those respectable people, all those law-abiding citizens, and none of them had helped. "I can't," Lily's voice cracked. "I can't let my brother grow up in this world, in the middle of guns and deals and whatever I heard in that room." Dominic didn't flinch. "What world, Lily?" His voice remained calm, but there was an edge to it now, something sharp beneath the control. "The world where Ray Mitchell beat a 6-year-old until his leg broke? The world where police came to your door and believed the man with the clean shirt instead of the children with the bruises?" He took another step. Not threatening, just present. "The world where you starved yourself so your brother could eat? Where you worked double shifts and came home to fists? Where you had nowhere to run because the system was designed to protect people like Ray?" Lily's eyes burned. "Or the world where the boy gets 3 meals a day? Where a doctor fixes his leg? Where he sleeps through the night without waking up screaming?" The tears came. She couldn't stop them, couldn't hold back the flood that had been building for 18 months, maybe longer. All the fear and exhaustion and helplessness she'd been carrying, it all broke loose at once. "That's not a fair choice," she whispered. "Life doesn't give fair choices." Dominic's voice softened, just slightly, just enough to sound human. "It only gives choices that are less terrible than others." Lily wiped her face with the back of her hand, but the tears kept falling. Behind her, Ethan stirred in his sleep, murmured something unintelligible, clutched the model car tighter. Dominic's eyes moved to the boy. "I'm not asking you to stay." His voice dropped lower. "I don't have the right to ask that." He looked back at Lily. "But I'm asking you to let Ethan choose." Lily stiffened. "He's 6 years old. He's a child. He doesn't. He's 6 years old, and he's already survived more than most adults ever face." Dominic's words cut through her protest. "He's spent 18 months learning to read danger, to hide from anger, to protect you even when he couldn't protect himself. He's earned the right to have a voice." Lily opened her mouth to argue, but the words died in her throat, because he was right. She'd been making decisions for Ethan since the day their parents died, deciding where they lived, deciding when they ran, deciding what they ate and what they wore and who they trusted. She'd done it out of love, out of necessity, out of the desperate need to keep him safe, but she'd never once asked him what he wanted, just like everyone else in his life. Lily looked at her brother. His small face was peaceful in sleep. The furrow between his brows, the one that had been there since the day they moved in with Ray, had finally smoothed away. His breathing was deep and even. For the first time in 18 months, he looked like a child instead of a survivor. Lily wiped her eyes one more time. When she spoke, her voice was raw but steady. "Let me talk to him." Morning light filtered through the curtains, soft and golden. Lily sat on the edge of the bed, her hands folded in her lap, her heart beating too fast. Ethan was beside her, the model car resting on his knees, his small fingers tracing its wheels absently. Dominic had left early. She'd heard his footsteps in the hallway before dawn, heard the front door close, heard the car pull away, giving them space, giving her time. Now it was just the two of them. "Ethan," Lily took a breath. "I need to talk to you about something." The boy looked up, His eyes went cautious immediately, that learned wariness of a child who knew that we need to talk usually meant something bad was coming. A move. A punishment. Another piece of bad news wrapped in gentle words. Lily's chest ached. "It's about Uncle Dom." Ethan's grip tightened on the car. "He's not." Lily searched for the right words. "How did you explain organized crime to a 6-year-old? How did you tell a child that the man who'd saved them might also be a monster? He's not a regular person," she finally said. "He does things that police don't like." Ethan tilted his head. "Like Uncle Ray does things police don't like?" Lily froze. She hadn't expected that. Hadn't expected her brother to draw that parallel so quickly, so matter-of-factly. "No," she said slowly. "It's different. Uncle Ray hits people. Uncle Dom. Does Uncle Dom hit people?" The question was simple, direct, the kind of clarity that only children possessed. "Maybe," Lily admitted. "Probably. Does he hit me? No. Does he hit you? No." Silence settled between them. Ethan looked down at his hands. Small hands, child's hands. But there across the back of his left hand, a thin white scar, a souvenir from the night Ray had used his belt buckle. "Uncle Ray is family," Ethan said slowly, as if working through a math problem. "He's supposed to take care of us. That's what family does." His voice was flat, reciting facts he'd been told but no longer believed. "But he hits me. He hits you. He says I'm a burden. He says I should disappear." Lily's throat closed. "Uncle Dom isn't family." Ethan looked up, and his eyes were too old, too knowing, too damaged for 6 years of life. "But he gave me food. He's fixing my leg. He didn't yell when I spilled juice on the carpet yesterday." The juice incident. Lily remembered it, Ethan's face going white with terror as the glass tipped, the purple liquid spreading across the cream-colored rug. He'd started crying immediately, babbling apologies, bracing for impact. Elena had simply laughed and said carpet could be cleaned. Dominic had walked past without even acknowledging it had happened. "I want you to choose," Lily said. Her voice cracked on the words. "We can leave right now. Go somewhere else. Find another way." She swallowed hard. "Or we can stay here, for a while longer." Ethan was quiet. His eyes drifted to the window, where sunlight was painting the garden in shades of gold and green. The fountain was still dry, but birds had gathered on its rim, life, finding its way even in winter. When he spoke, his voice was small but certain. "I want to stay with Uncle Dom." Lily opened her mouth to argue, to explain, to list all the reasons why this was complicated, dangerous, wrong by every standard society had taught her. But Ethan wasn't finished. "In the diner," he said, still looking at the window, "I asked so many people if I could sit with them. They all said no." His hand tightened on the model car. "Uncle Dom said yes." He turned to face her, and there were tears in his eyes now, but his voice stayed steady. "That's the first time anyone let me sit down, Lily. The first time anyone didn't look at me like I was trash." His lip trembled. "I don't want to keep looking for somewhere to sit. I'm tired." The words cracked something open in Lily's chest. She reached out and pulled her brother into her arms, holding him tight, feeling his small body shake against hers. He was 6 years old. He had a broken leg and a broken heart, and a wisdom about safety that no child should ever need. And he was right. He was so painfully, impossibly right. "Okay," Lily whispered into his hair. "Okay, we'll stay." That evening, Lily found Dominic in the study. She'd been looking for him since dinner, wanting to tell him they were staying, wanting to explain Ethan's choice, wanting to bridge the distance that had opened between them that morning. The study door was ajar, warm light spilling into the hallway. She pushed it open slowly and stopped. Dominic stood with his back to her, facing the far wall. His shoulders were tense, his hands clasped behind him, and he was staring at a photograph. Lily had noticed the picture before during her first tour of the house, when everything had been a blur of wealth and confusion. But she hadn't looked closely, hadn't seen what it held. Now she did. A boy, maybe 8 years old, dark hair, slightly curly, a smile so wide it seemed to split his face, and eyes, gray eyes, bright with mischief and joy. Eyes exactly like Dominic's. "Your brother?" The words left her mouth before she could stop them. Dominic didn't turn around. "Marco." His voice was flat, carefully controlled. He loved model cars, Lego sets, racing me around the garden on his bicycle. A pause. He always cheated. Said the shortcut through the roses didn't count as cheating. Lily stepped into the room. Slowly, carefully. "The way you'd approach a wounded animal? Tell me," she said softly. "Tell me what happened." For a long moment, Dominic didn't speak. Then, still facing the photograph, he began, 10 years ago. Territory war with Kozlov. His voice was distant, like he was reading from a script he'd memorized against his will. I was in a meeting downtown. Important. The kind you don't walk out of. He exhaled. Marco was here, with Elena. We thought the house was safe. We had guards. We had protocols. Silence stretched. Kozlov sent men. Not to kidnap. Not to negotiate. Dominic's jaw tightened. To send a message. Lily felt cold spreading through her chest. I got the call. Drove home. 15 minutes at top speed. Running every red light. His hands curled into fists at his sides. I was 5 minutes too late. The words hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. 5 minutes. Dominic's voice cracked just barely, just for a moment. And when I walked into the kitchen, Marco was on the floor. Blood everywhere, eyes still open. He turned then. And Lily saw what he'd been hiding behind the cold mask, behind the control, behind 10 years of building an empire. Pain. Raw, devastating, bottomless pain. I built all of this after that. He gestured vaguely at the mansion around them. Power, money, fear. I made sure no one in my world would ever be vulnerable again. His hand dropped, but I couldn't save the one person who mattered most. Lily didn't speak. She walked across the room until she stood beside him, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his body. She didn't touch him, didn't try to comfort him with empty words. She just stood there, present, witness to his wound. When Ethan asked to sit with me, Dominic said, his voice dropping to nearly a whisper, I saw Marco, same age, same eyes, same desperation. He turned to look at her. I couldn't turn away again. Lily understood then. This wasn't charity. This wasn't a transaction. This wasn't even kindness in the traditional sense. This was a man trying to save a ghost. She reached out and placed her hand over his, gently, without expectation. You can't replace Marco, she said quietly. No one can. Dominic's hand tensed under hers but didn't pull away. But you can be there for Ethan. Lily's voice was steady. You can be the person who shows up, who stays, who doesn't let him down. She squeezed his hand. And that matters. That matters more than you know. Dominic looked at her. Not like she was someone to protect. Not like she was a guest in his home or a burden he'd accepted. He looked at her like she was someone who understood, someone who carried her own grief, her own guilt, her own desperate need to make things right. Someone who saw him not the boss, not the legend, not the monster, but the man underneath. The silence between them shifted, became something else, something warmer. And for the first time in 10 years, Dominic Velasco didn't feel completely alone. 847 Millbrook Avenue. The house sat dark and silent, curtains drawn against the December night. No Christmas lights, no decorations, just peeling paint and dead grass and the rusted pickup truck in the driveway. Inside, Ray Mitchell sat in his usual chair, the recliner, with the torn armrest, positioned perfectly between the television and the kitchen where he kept his bottles. The TV was off. The room was dark except for the pale glow of his phone screen. An empty whiskey bottle lay on its side by his feet. Another, half full, was wedged between his thigh and the armrest. Ray stared at nothing. The police had been useless. He'd called them that morning, reported his niece and nephew missing, painted himself as the worried guardian. They'd gone to the Velasco estate and walked away empty-handed within 30 minutes. Some lawyer had appeared out of nowhere. Expensive suit, gold watch, papers that claimed temporary guardianship had been transferred pending investigation. How the hell did he get a judge that fast? Ray had demanded. The officer had shrugged. Everything was in order, sir. Nothing we can do. Money, power, the things Ray had always lacked and always resented, the things Dominic Velasco had in abundance. Ray took a long pull from the bottle. The whiskey burned his throat, but it couldn't burn away the rage festering in his chest. 18 months. 18 months he'd spent dealing with those ungrateful brats, feeding them, housing them, listening to Lily's crying and Ethan's whimpering, pretending to be a decent human being whenever anyone was watching. And now some stranger in a black suit had taken them away. Taken his meal ticket away. Ray's hand found his phone. He scrolled through his contacts with a shaking thumb, searching for a number he hadn't dialed in 3 years, a number he'd sworn he'd never call again. But desperate times called for desperate measures. The phone rang twice. Mitchell? The voice that answered was thick with a Russian accent, dripping with amused contempt. You're still alive? I assumed the alcohol had killed you by now. Ray swallowed his pride. It tasted worse than the whiskey. Kozlov, I need to talk. So talk. I have information about Velasco, about his weakness. Silence on the other end. Ray could almost hear Viktor Kozlov thinking, calculating, weighing the value of this unexpected call. Continue. Ray leaned forward in his chair, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial rasp. He's got my niece and nephew at his place. Been there almost a week. And he's soft for the kid, the little boy. Treats him like he's something special. Ray's lip curled. Velasco goes weak for that brat. You grab the kid. You can make him do whatever you want. More silence. Then Viktor laughed. It was a cold sound, the laugh of a man who had ordered deaths and watched them happen without blinking. Interesting. Velasco has a weakness after 10 years? The amusement in his voice was sharp. This is valuable information, Mitchell. What do you want in return? The kid. Ray's answer came fast. I want custody back, and I want money. Custody of the boy? Viktor's tone shifted to something darker. Why do you want a child so badly? He's worth $200,000. Ray didn't bother hiding his motives. Life insurance from his parents. I control it until he's 18. A beat of silence. Then Viktor laughed again, but this time there was disgust beneath the amusement. You would sell your own nephew for money? The Russian clicked his tongue. How pathetic. Ray's face flushed with humiliation, but he kept his mouth shut. Viktor continued, his voice turning businesslike. But pathetic men are easy to control. We have a deal, Mitchell. You give me information. I give you your precious money and your little meal ticket. The line went dead. Ray lowered the phone and stared at the dark screen. A smile spread across his face, crooked, ugly, triumphant. He didn't notice how his hands shook. Didn't think about what he'd just set in motion. Didn't consider that Viktor Kozlov had built an empire on broken promises and disposable allies. Ray Mitchell had just signed a contract with the devil, and the devil never honored his agreements. A week passed, and the Velasco mansion began to feel like something it hadn't been in a decade. A home. Morning. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows as Elena stood at the stove, her apron dusted with flour. Beside her, perched on a step stool, Ethan held a wooden spoon like a sword. Now, slowly, Elena instructed. We fold the batter, not stir. Fold. Ethan's face scrunched with concentration. His small hands moved carefully, mimicking Elena's motions. Batter splattered across his cheek, his nose, the counter. He looked up at Elena with wide, worried eyes. I made a mess. Elena laughed, a warm, rolling sound that filled the kitchen. Messes mean you're learning. Now keep folding. Ethan grinned. It was the first time that sound had echoed through these walls in 10 years. The first time laughter had replaced the heavy silence that had settled after Marco's death. From the doorway, Lily watched with tears she didn't bother hiding. Afternoon. Dominic came home early. This was unprecedented. Marcus had mentioned once, in passing, that Dominic often didn't return until midnight. Sometimes later. Sometimes not at all. But today, his car pulled into the driveway at 4 o'clock. Ethan spotted him through the window and ran limped. Really, his leg still not fully healed across the lawn to meet him. Uncle Dom, can we play soccer? Dominic looked down at the boy, at the eager eyes, at the messy hair, at the pure, uncomplicated joy radiating from someone who had known so little joy. Your leg, it's fine. It doesn't hurt anymore. Please? It was a lie. Lily could see Ethan favoring his left side even from the porch. But she also saw something she'd never seen before. She saw Dominic's mask crack into something resembling a smile. All right, but if you get tired, we stop. They played for an hour. Ethan fell 3 times. Each time, Dominic was there, catching him, steadying him, never letting him hit the ground, never making him feel weak for stumbling. Evening. Dinner was served in the formal dining room, but there was nothing formal about it. 4 people sat around a table meant for 12. Dominic at the head, Lily to his right, Ethan beside her, Elena across the way. No phones, no business, no guards lurking in corners. Just food and conversation, and the strange, fragile miracle of people becoming a family. Ethan told a story about a caterpillar he'd found in the garden. Elena pretended to be horrified. Lily laughed until her sides hurt, and Dominic listened with an expression that might have been wonder, if you knew how to look for it. Later, Lily stood on the back porch, watching the sun sink below the Chicago skyline. The December air was cold, but she didn't go inside. Elena appeared beside her, 2 cups of tea in hand. You'll catch a chill. Lily accepted the cup, wrapping her fingers around its warmth. In the garden below, Dominic was carrying Ethan on his shoulders, the boy's laughter ringing across the frost-covered lawn. I haven't seen him like this in a long time, Elena said softly. Like what? Elena smiled, sad and tender at once. like someone who has something to come home to. That night, the house was quiet. Ethan had fallen asleep mid-sentence, exhausted from a day of playing. Elena had retired to her quarters. The guards were invisible, as always. Lily found Dominic on the second-floor balcony, staring out at the city lights. She stood beside him, close, closer than she would have a week ago. "I've been thinking," Dominic said without preamble. "About the bakery." Lily blinked. "What?" "You should open one." He still wasn't looking at her. "I'll invest. Consider it a business opportunity." Lily shook her head. "I can't take your money, then call it a loan." His voice was matter-of-fact. "You can pay me back in cake. One every week." Lily stared at him. And then she laughed. Really laughed. The kind that bubbled up from somewhere deep, surprising even herself. Dominic turned to look at her. Something shifted in his eyes. The ice that had been there since the day they met seemed to thin, to crack, to reveal something warmer beneath. He didn't smile. Not quite. But it was close. Lily didn't realize she was falling in love with this man, and she didn't know that miles away, in a dark house on Millbrook Avenue, a storm was gathering. The next morning started like any other. Lily helped Ethan into the back seat of the black sedan, making sure his seatbelt was secure. His leg was healing well, Dr. Warren had said. The surgery was a complete success, but she still treated him like glass. 2 guards sat in the front. Dominic's men, vetted, armed, trusted. "It's just a follow-up," Lily told Ethan, smoothing his hair. "Then we'll get ice cream on the way home." Ethan's face lit up. "Can I get chocolate?" "You can get whatever you want." The drive to the clinic was uneventful. The examination was quick. Ethan's leg was healing perfectly, the doctor said. A few more weeks of physical therapy, and he'd be running like any other boy his age. Lily held Ethan's hand as they walked back to the car, her heart lighter than it had been in years. She didn't notice the black SUVs parked at the corner. The intersection. The sedan stopped at a red light. Normal, routine. Then everything happened at once. 2 SUVs, black, windows tinted, screamed out of nowhere, boxing the sedan between them. Doors flew open before the vehicles had fully stopped. Men in black, ski masks, guns. The guard in the driver's seat reached for his weapon. Bang! He slumped forward, blood spreading across the dashboard. The second guard twisted in his seat, gun half drawn. Bang! He collapsed sideways. Lily screamed. She threw herself over Ethan, covering his small body with her own. Her hands fumbled for the door handle on the opposite side. Locked. Locked. Why was it locked? The window beside her shattered. Hands reached in, grabbed her hair, her arms, dragged her out of the car. "Lily! Lily!" Ethan's scream cut through the chaos. His small hands clutched at her jacket, her fingers, anything he could hold on to. "Let go of her! Let go!" A fist connected with Lily's temple. The world went white, then black. The last thing she heard was Ethan crying her name. The Velasco estate. Dominic sat in his study, reviewing territory reports with Marcus. Routine business. Nothing urgent. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered without greeting. That wasn't how he operated. Velasco? The voice was Russian. Familiar. A voice he hadn't heard in 5 years but had never forgotten. Victor Kozlov. Kozlov. Dominic's tone dropped several degrees. "First call in half a decade. This must be important. Check your messages." The line went dead. Dominic lowered the phone, opened his texts. 1 message, 1 photo. His blood turned to ice. Lily unconscious, blood trickling from her temple, hands bound behind her back. Ethan awake, crying, terror etched across his face, tied to a chair beside his sister. A warehouse, dim lights, concrete floor. The text beneath the image was simple. "Come alone. Bring the Southside territory. Or watch them die." For 1 second, Dominic didn't move. Then he hurled the phone across the room. It shattered against the wall, pieces scattering across the hardwood floor. Marcus stepped back instinctively. In 15 years of service, he had never seen Dominic lose control. "Boss, get everyone." Dominic's voice was low, too calm. The calm before an explosion. "Everyone. Now. Boss. If Kozlov has them," I said. "Now." Marcus was already moving, phone pressed to his ear, barking orders. Dominic stood in the center of his study, chest heaving, fists clenched so tight his knuckles had gone white. On the floor, the shattered phone screen still glowed. Ethan's face, tear-streaked, terrified. Marco's face, blood-soaked, eyes open. The images overlapped in Dominic's mind, merged, became one. He had been 5 minutes too late for Marco, 5 minutes that had haunted him for 10 years. 5 minutes he had never forgiven himself for. He looked at the broken phone, at the crying boy in the photograph, at the woman who had somehow become essential to him without his permission. His eyes weren't cold anymore. They burned. This time, Dominic said to the empty room, his voice a promise and a threat wrapped in iron. "I'll be there first." The abandoned warehouse sat on the edge of Chicago's West Side Industrial District. Rusted metal, broken windows, the kind of place where things happened that never made the newspapers. Inside, a single bulb hung from the ceiling, casting weak yellow light across the concrete floor. Shadows pooled in the corners like spilled ink. Viktor Kozlov sat in a chair at the center of the space, legs crossed, perfectly at ease. His silver hair was slicked back. His suit was immaculate. He looked like a man waiting for a business meeting, not a kidnapping. Ray Mitchell stood beside him, shifting from foot to foot like an anxious dog waiting for scraps. Against the far wall, Lily was bound to a metal chair. Blood had dried on her temple. Her wrists were raw from the rope, but her eyes were open now, watching everything with the sharp awareness of a woman who had survived worse. On the floor beside her, Ethan lay curled in a ball. His hands were tied in front of him. His face was streaked with dried tears. But he wasn't crying anymore. Silence means less pain. He'd learned that lesson long ago. The warehouse door groaned open. Dominic Velasco stepped inside, alone. As demanded, he wore his usual black suit. No visible weapons. His face was carved from stone, betraying nothing. But his eyes were different, burning with something cold and terrible. Victor rose from his chair, spreading his arms in mock welcome. "Velasco, finally, we meet face to face." His smile was thin, reptilian. 10 years is a long time. Dominic stopped 10 feet away. His gaze swept the room. Lily, bound and bleeding. Ethan, small and silent. Ray, sweating in the shadows. "Let them go," Victor laughed. "Always straight to business. I've always admired that about you." He clasped his hands behind his back. "The South Side Territory. Transfer papers. Then your pets go free." Ray pushed forward, his voice high with greed. "And the kid comes with me. That was the deal." Ethan flinched at the sound of his uncle's voice. Then something changed. The boy lifted his head, looked directly at Ray, and spoke. "I don't want to go with you." His voice trembled, but it didn't break. "You hit me. You hate me. You said I should disappear." Each word landed like a stone in still water. "I'm not going back. Never." The silence that followed was absolute. Victor turned to Ray with an expression of pure contempt. "How pathetic." His lip curled. "Even your own nephew would rather die than return to you." Ray's face went purple with humiliation. He opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Dominic's voice cut through the tension. "Kozlov." Victor turned back, eyebrows raised. "You want war?" Dominic's voice was quiet, deadly. "I'll give you war, but not today." Victor chuckled. "You're not in a position to negotiate, Velasco. I have what you care about." He gestured toward Lily and Ethan. "And we both know you'll give me anything to get them back." Dominic's gaze found Lily, across the warehouse, through the dim light and the fear and the blood. Their eyes met. Lily nodded once. "Do it." Dominic moved. His hand flicked a blur of motion, and a blade hidden in his sleeve flew through the air. It buried itself in Victor's forearm. The Russian screamed, his gun clattering to the floor, and then the world exploded. The warehouse doors burst open. Marcus led the charge, a dozen of Dominic's men pouring in from every entrance. Gunfire erupted in short, controlled bursts. Victor's guards fell in seconds, outnumbered, outmaneuvered. This was the South Side Dominic's territory. They'd walked into a trap thinking they were setting one. Victor clutched his bleeding arm, face twisted with rage. "This isn't over, Velasco." "Yes," Dominic said, walking past him without a second glance. "It is." Ray tried to run. He made it 3 steps before 2 of Dominic's men caught him. They slammed him against the wall, pinning him in place. "No, wait, we had a deal. Kozlov." Victor didn't even look at him. Dominic reached Lily. His hands that had done terrible things, hands that had built an empire on blood, shook as he cut the ropes, binding her wrists. "Are you hurt?" He pulled her against him, held her like she might vanish if he let go, like she was the only real thing in a world full of ghosts. Lily buried her face in his chest. "Ethan." Her voice broke. "Save Ethan." The aftermath. Sirens painted the night in red and blue. Police cars surrounded the warehouse within 20 minutes of Marcus's anonymous call. Viktor Kozlov was dragged out in handcuffs, his silver hair disheveled, his immaculate suit stained with blood from the wound in his arm. The evidence was overwhelming. Kidnapping, assault, conspiracy. Enough to put him away for decades. Ray Mitchell followed minutes later, but his charges ran deeper. Child abuse, neglect, conspiracy to kidnap. The testimony Ethan would give to social workers finally, blessedly, to people who believed him, painted a picture so horrific that even hardened detectives looked away. For the first time in 18 months, the system worked. The hospital, white walls, antiseptic smell, the steady beep of monitors. Ethan sat in a hospital bed, his small legs dangling over the edge. A doctor had examined him, some bruises, minor scrapes, nothing serious. He'd learned not to fight back. Fighting back made things worse. The thought made Lily's heart shatter all over again. She sat beside his bed, holding his hand, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry." Her voice cracked. "I couldn't protect you. I should have done more. I should have." Ethan shook his head. "You did protect me." He squeezed her fingers with his small hand. "Every time Uncle Ray came at me, you got in the way. Every time." His eyes, those two old eyes, met hers. "You took the hits for me, Lily." "I remember." Lily sobbed harder. Then Ethan's gaze drifted to the doorway. Dominic stood there, leaning against the frame. Not entering, not intruding, just present. "And Uncle Dom protected me too," Ethan said softly. "He came for us." What came after? 2 weeks later, the family court granted full custody to Lily. The trust fund, $200,000 meant to be Ethan's future, was transferred to her management. Ray Mitchell, facing multiple felony charges, had no standing to contest. 1 month later, Ethan's leg healed completely. He still walked with a slight limp. Dr. Warren said it might always be there, a reminder of what he'd survived, but he could run now, could play, could be a child again. 3 months later, a small bakery opened on a quiet street near the Velasco estate. The sign above the door read, "Marco's Sweet Corner, opening day." Sunlight streamed through the bakery windows, illuminating display cases filled with pastries, cakes, and cookies. The smell of fresh bread and chocolate hung in the air like a promise. Ethan sat at the counter, crayons scattered before him, drawing a picture with intense concentration. His legs swung back and forth on the high stool, a little boy's restless energy finally set free. Lily stood behind the display case, arranging cupcakes. Her hair was tied back. Flour dusted her apron. She was smiling, really smiling, the kind of smile that reached her eyes. The door chimed. Dominic walked in, black suit, as always. But today, he carried something unusual, a bouquet of flowers in one hand, something hidden in his pocket. "Uncle Dom." Ethan launched himself off the stool and ran across the bakery, crashing into Dominic's legs with the full force of a 6-year-old's love. Dominic caught him, lifted him up. The movement was natural, now practiced over months of bedtime stories and soccer games and quiet conversations about nothing and everything. "Did you bring me something?" Ethan's eyes sparkled with hope. "Flowers for your sister." Dominic shifted the bouquet. "And for you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object. A model car, blue, shiny, identical to the one that still sat on Marco's shelf. "This one is yours." Ethan clutched the car to his chest, eyes glistening. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you, Uncle Dom." Lily approached them, wiping her hands on her apron. She took the flowers, roses, her favorite, though she'd never told him that, and looked up at the man who had changed everything. Then she leaned in and kissed his cheek. Soft, simple, a beginning. "Thank you," she murmured, "for everything." Dominic looked at her, at the boy in his arms, at the bakery named for the brother he'd lost. And for the first time in 10 years, Dominic Velasco smiled. A real smile, unguarded, full. From behind the register, Elena watched, her weathered hands pressed against her heart. Tears rolled freely down her cheeks. She had spent 10 years watching this house grow colder, watching Dominic become harder, watching Marco's room gather dust while his memory gathered pain. And now there was laughter. There was warmth. There was a little boy's voice echoing through halls that had been silent for so long. "Sometimes," Elena whispered to herself, "family isn't about blood." She watched Dominic set Ethan down, watched Lily take his hand, watched the three of them stand together in the morning light like something whole. Sometimes, family begins with a single question. She smiled through her tears. "Can I sit with you?" The lessons this story teaches us are simple but profound. Family isn't always the people we're born to. Sometimes, it's the strangers who choose to stay when everyone else walks away. Safety isn't always found in the places society tells us to look. Sometimes, the most dangerous people wear kind faces, and the safest harbor comes from unexpected shores. And courage, true courage, isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a 6-year-old boy, limping across a diner, asking a stranger for permission to sit down. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new video. A like and share helps us reach more people who might need to hear these stories. We'd love to know, how did this story make you feel? Have you ever experienced a moment when a stranger's kindness changed your life? Or perhaps you've been that stranger for someone else? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one, and your stories inspire us to keep creating. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being part of this community. We wish you good health, happiness, and peace in your daily life. May you always find your seat at the table, and may you always have the courage to offer one to someone in need. Goodbye for now, and we'll see you in the next video.